community and environment where people of all genders, neurotypes, ethnic background can thrive and feel empowered in inclusive team. And we have the community is run by a team of volunteers. These are the lovely faces behind the community. If you are not already part of the community, we've got a Slack channel. On the previous slide, we have the QR code where you can scan to join us. And we've also got a couple of events coming up. November 7th, we have an in-person event in London, and then November 12th online, November 19th online. Here is also a QR code here to access our Luma page and scan the QR code here and subscribe to our Luma so that you get notified of every new event that is coming up. I'll now hand back to Anna to introduce Simonetta.
You're muted, Anna. We can't hear you.
Sorry, classic mistake. So I'll start over. So as I mentioned earlier, we've got Simonetta here with us today to run this really interesting session. Simonetta actually ran an event for FPL earlier this year, so we're super excited to have her back. Yeah, a bit about Simonetta. She has more than a decade experience in product and growth roles. She's led high-performing teams, and prior to that, she was in finance. And nowadays, she's a coach. She's a coach to product people, product leaders. She runs an excellent course on finance concepts for product people, which was actually the subject of the event she ran with us earlier this year. And yeah, she's super passionate about ethics in AI and how you can build inclusivity and fairness into your AI products, which is why she's here today. So I'm really excited to learn from her, and I'm sure it'll be a very interesting session for everyone. So I'll hand it over to Simonetta now for the main.
Thank you, Anna, for the nice introduction, and I'll start sharing my screen. I think you probably have to stop sharing yours first, or I will just take over. It lets me take over. So I hope you can see my screen that says how to build inclusivity and fairness into your AI products. Hello, everyone. For those of you who don't know me and want to know more about what Anna just shared, she's right. I started in finance. I went to sales. I went to product. I spent 15 years there. I'm now coaching product leaders. My business is called Inclusive Leaders because I always felt strongly that inclusivity is a key enabler of high-performing teams. And with that in mind, when everything AI started blowing up and happening, I started to think about how can I make it easier for product teams to start thinking about inclusivity and fairness right from the get-go, to embed ethical concepts into how you build an AI product. Because oftentimes, in my experience, these can be an afterthought. And if you don't start thinking about it right from the get-go, it's much harder to build this in later in the game. So I hope that every one of you who's attending today's session and is starting out in exploring how to set up AI processes and or build features or entire products with AI gets a head start in thinking about this at the beginning of the process. And I'll go over tips and tricks of how to make that happen. So that's our topic today, how to actually do this in practice, right? I think it's good to start with some framing and definitions. Then we're going to cover some tactics and how you can nurture inclusivity as part of what happens in your product lifecycle, and like really practically, how do you apply this knowledge in your process and your building of products? And then at the end, we're going to close with questions. Anna already put the link to Slido in the chat. If I'm saying something that doesn't make sense, you can also put the question in the chat as we go along. However, I'm not very good at watching my notes and the presentation and the comments in the chat at the same time. So maybe I'll need help, Anna, if something pops up in the chat that you feel like needs to be urgently addressed right away, then let's do it. All right. With that, let's jump right in. I want to frame up this whole conversation about building inclusivity into an AI product with this quote by Amy Webb: "The future is not something we predict, it's something we create." This coming from one of the leading futurists in the world, the woman who holds the keynote at South by Southwest, talking to this whole tech audience about future trends in tech, I think is quite remarkable, because her whole career is built on predictions, yet she is firmly in the camp of you can have these predictions guide your thinking, but ultimately it's still something that you decide how you want to be with that, what you're going to make out of it. And therefore, I agree with her. We create this future, and it's rooted in our vision and values, the things that we hold close to our heart, our ethical concepts, our desire to build inclusivity, for example. If we truly mean this, then it's up to us to build this world that has inclusivity at heart. And for me, to illustrate this a little bit further, when I prompt an LLM or a Gen AI tool that makes pictures, and I'm prompting it that I want to see a table of product leaders, I don't want to see this kind of picture come out of it. I'd love to see something like this, where she might be leading this team, or these two are co-leading this team together, or leadership in this product organization is looking like her. These are not the images that you currently get out of a Gen AI tool when you just put in, show me a table full of product leaders. So how does this matter to me? When I'm saying I need to root my thinking in my values, and I need to be explicit in the things that I'm committed to. So for me, if I want to envision the world I want to build, that means openness, it means beauty, it means inclusivity, belonging, pathfinding, creative expression, and newness and surprise. And you realize this is more than inclusivity, right? There are other things here that are close to my heart. But any kind of conversation about creating an impact out there in the world starts with clarity on what actually matters to you. So here is my question to you. If you think about the future you want to build, what matters to you in the world? And I know Anna has a little poll prepped, so she's going to pop it into butter for you right now. I'd love for you to take a moment to put in something that matters to you in the world. Maybe it's different from what I shared. Maybe it's all the same things, but what's important to you? What kind of world would you like to see? Anna, do I need to stop sharing the screen so we can see the results, or would it overlay?
I think it should be fine.
Okay. So I'm reading fairness, kindness, openness, empathy, equal opportunities, community. All right. Lots of things I also hold close to my heart. Keep these phrases in mind, because this is the starting point of building something that matters to you into a product you want to build. So I know today's session is about building inclusivity and fairness into AI products, but you already named other concepts that are adjacent to that are also important to you, that you also want to see in the world. I want to give one final definition before we get into practical application of how we can do this. When we're thinking about ethics, it is about being explicit on the knowledge on how to behave well. And the purpose of ethics is to make rules that help everyone in your team, in your context, in your society, or wherever this ethics applies, to understand what's good and what is bad, what is right and what is wrong, what do we want to see in the world and nurture versus what are the things that we don't want to see in the world. And so when we think about building something like inclusivity into our products, right, that would be a rule of something that we want to see, that we deem to be a good in the world, that we think is right to build. Then we need to also make it easy for the team around us, for the people around us to understand, okay, what do we mean with this? And it's inclusivity, it's not unfairness that we want to build, right? So it's helpful to codify this and make these rules super simple to follow and understand. So when we're now thinking about how do we practically get started with something like this, I think it's good to think about like what is an AI product in the end, right? Like an AI product in the end is like some sort of a purpose of the model or the process or the thing you're building. It also rests on a foundation of our ethical thinking, including our values. That's kind of like the meta thing before you even get started building anything. Then obviously, when you have an AI product, you have some sort of input data. So that's like an angle you can take where you can apply your thinking about ethics to input data. You have the model itself, right? The algorithm, the model weights, the guardrails, the evals, everything that is actually making up the model itself, where you can again put this lens against it. How well does this algorithm deal with concepts of inclusivity, deal with concepts of fairness, deal with concepts of trust? How might I build a guardrail that has inclusivity and diversity at heart? If I don't build this guardrail, then I must not be so surprised if my model in the end acts in a way that isn't considering the concept that I have close to my heart. And then obviously there is the model output and output data. And again, we can monitor continuously and look at whatever comes out of the model to understand, is this meeting our idea of the ethical foundations and the values that we wanted to have in place to begin with? So if we think about it kind of conceptually like this, and we want to apply this thinking that ethics is about making it easy to follow the rules about the concepts that we want to actually see in the world, and we want to have a concept like inclusivity be considered by this whole process, then one thing that we can do to make it easy for the team and everyone around us to follow along our ethical foundation, including our values, could be to codify the whole thing in a code of ethics. I brought you an example of a way to express ethical rules in a code of ethics. This is from an organization called FemAI. They're based in Berlin. They have kind of been thinking about if we're living in a patriarchal society and models in their input data take our skewed lens of how the world should be into account to come up with whatever output this creates, and I want to influence the system, then for them, what needs to be at heart is equity, justice, and freedom. You could put in the center of this code of ethics any of the other concepts that you named earlier, right? Like you named openness. A lot of you named openness as something that you want to see in the world. That could be a core value that sits in the center of your code of ethics. Whatever that is, I think it needs to be in conversation with your team, that you come up with some sort of representation of how inclusivity might live in the center of this thing. And inclusivity might break down further into notions of equity, of justice, of freedom, of trust, of other concepts that are clearer to grasp and easy to make decisions around. So my tactic number one is start conversations. What impact should our AI products have in the world? How might we advance inclusivity and fairness in what we do? And what other values do we want to honor as part of what it is that we want to build? It starts with having conversations, because it's not so important that you have a nice code of ethics hanging on some wall and no one adheres to it. It is important to have the conversations about it and get the team to come along and want to follow along with you on the concepts that you care about. I think if you want inclusivity, you also have to have trust. There's a whole list of values that might play a role in how you look at ethics. But I want to pick out on this trust piece for two reasons. Because one, I think you cannot have inclusivity without a trusting relationship in the team, between the people in the team. And also because trust and trustworthy AI are the philosophical, ethical concepts behind the EU AI Act, which could be a compliance ally in helping you get more clear about what it is that you want and do not want to build, and also maybe how not building inclusivity could be a risky move. So if we pick out trust and we think about how might we build trust, right? And I said, let's start a conversation about this, and you explore with your team how you might build trust into an AI experience of a product. It could look like clear labeling in the UX that this is an AI enabled feature, right? This bot is a bot. It's not a human that you're interacting with. It could be in explaining clearly what the capabilities and limitations are. It could be about sharing the quality and accuracy metrics of the process you're building, of the product you're building. It could be in transparency on data sources and what you did with your input data to make it more fair, to make it more inclusive. It could be in explanations and how to act on outputs. And it could be in the use of simple language. All of these are trust enabling mechanisms that also have touch points with how inclusive your product is to use by people out there in the world. It's another example of an ethical principle or an ethical rule that might make it easy for a team to understand what's meant with what you want to build. And this guy, Akshay Kaur, wrote this book, Designing Human-Centric AI Experiences, which I really recommend. And he says very clearly, a system that's not trustworthy is not useful. And then he goes deeper and he explains what he means when he says trustworthy. And he says it needs to be explainable, it needs to be transparent, and it needs to be non-biased. And when I'm reading non-biased, I'm reading inclusive, right? The non-biased, if you flip it on its head, it means it is inclusive. It is not biased in one or the other direction. He also says the system should be safe, obviously. And he also says your system should be beneficial. So it's another example maybe of a sort of codified, written down rule of how you might think about the AI product you want to create. And instead of using the words trustworthy, you could say ensure your system is trustworthy and inclusive, right? If you want to get more explicit, more clear about something that you really want to build into your product. You could also work with data sheets. Data sheets kind of are about, and there's a QR code here that links to an example template for data sheets. Data sheets are about figuring out your input data, documenting, creating transparency around your input data, and also writing down the rules of how this data should be used, how it got collected, who owns this data, what has been done to clean this data, has there anything been done to de-bias this data? There's a whole bunch of algorithms that help you look at input data to understand how inclusive and or biased it might be. And you can take something like a data sheet approach and ask in your team, for example, do we even have such a thing? If we have it, where is it? Can we take a look at it? Can we take our code of ethics and hold it against this data sheet and see, is there anything in here that helps us get better at understanding how inclusive is this data set? What might we be able to do to make this input data into my algorithm more inclusive to begin with? And I already mentioned how the EU AI Act is picking up on notions of inclusivity and notions of trustworthiness. And so there's a positioning paper that I can also share the link with after this, that's going into how you might create a trustworthy AI experience that has to be lawful, ethical, and robust. And they name ethical principles, and they name 7 additional requirements that, if you adhere to them, make it more likely that you will end up with a trustworthy and, I would say, also inclusive AI experience. Because if you let these ethical principles, that you have respect for human autonomy, that you want to prevent harm, that you want to be fair, or in other words, inclusive also, and you want to have explicability in your product, then this can guide your approach and thinking for compliance as well as ethics. And this is how you can build a bridge between what happens from a compliance angle and what happens from, I want to have ethical concepts at the heart of my product experience, how they can come together in a nice way and work together. And the second part of this framework are these 7 key requirements that the idea is that you should be continuously monitoring them and looking at them over the whole lifetime of your product life cycle. And you see here as well, there is this notion of diversity, non-discrimination, and fairness in here. And there's also this notion of societal and environmental well-being in here again. So this could be pieces to the puzzle for how you can use also something like, we want to be compliant. Therefore, if we build with these ethical principles and these key requirements in mind from the beginning, we can avoid having to touch it again further down the road because it becomes a non-compliant product. So I just named them again, and there is the mention of the source of this as well. It comes from the ethic guidelines for trustworthy AI that was made as a foundation for the EU AI Act, and it mentions this point of fairness in here. And there are these key requirements where in a different representation, they say they're not, one is more important than the other, they're all equally important, but it says they should be continuously monitored and evaluated throughout the AI system's life cycle. So if we want to actually do this, if we want to have inclusivity in our product from the beginning, and we want to continuously monitor this, we're doing, on the one hand, the thing that is asked to be compliant to begin with, but now we're like, okay, what does this really practically mean for us? That's why I took some time to kind of think about, and this is way too small to read. You should not and cannot read this. I just want to illustrate the thinking behind this thing. I made this canvas. You can download it from my website. It can be a conversation starter. There's lots of tools named here that at each part of the product lifecycle might be helpful in helping you think about and actually apply ethical thinking and tactics in how you build process AI products. You start in discovery, you go in the analysis phase and development into introduction to market and how you scale it and how you even shut it down. There are touch points. There's questions in this canvas you can use. There's links to tools in this canvas you can use. You can download it from my blog, but I want to highlight some things in here for you. In discovery, I think this is the time where you should be discussing ethical principles. Something like the content of this presentation or a training or whatever is what you should be already thinking about if you want to then design an AI product that has something like inclusivity at heart. You obviously are thinking in discovery about what problems are we solving. Is AI best suited to solve this problem to begin with? The answer might well be no, right? Does our team have the relevant skills? Do I need to have a training on ethics, on compliance? Where is my team at? This is kind of like what should be happening before you even start seriously putting thought into an AI product. Then as you do your analysis phase and you kind of like look at like how might we put, let's say you have decided you want to do this, right? This is where a code of ethics could be helpful because it can help make decisions along the way. It makes help design choices. It makes help how you think about the model. It helps you think about where do I source my input data? What do I need to do with my input data? This is where you create your data sheets. This is where you might also create an AI business model canvas where you start creating your model cards, where you need to ask yourself, is there non-biased training data? Because if the answer is no, and you want inclusivity, you probably will not get it, right? And you need to start thinking at this phase also, is there anything in the EU AI Act or other regulatory compliance laws that apply in your jurisdiction that needs to be considered? And then as you're building the whole thing, you are creating your model cards, you're starting to do your first set of input-output validations. And that's where you want to then hold against it your code of ethics and say, okay, we wanted to have inclusivity in the output of this model. How might we see that we actually have it? What kind of an eval do we need to build in order to understand whether inclusivity is considered by this model, yes or no. Also, you might want to think about, do I need a kill switch? Like, what if this thing spits out things that I really do not want to see? What is my fallback mechanism for this? And here, obviously, as you're building it, you're also trying to look at what can you do in the UX experience of your product? How can you make it more transparent? How can you make that more inclusive? As you launch it, you start getting real world interactions, unexpected outputs from your product potentially. So that means you have to regularly review what comes out of your model. And again, you hold this against obviously the purpose of what your AI product was to begin with, and also your ethical considerations like inclusivity. This is where you have data from feedback channels, where you keep speaking with your legal team about whether something has changed in the legal landscape, which I can guarantee you it will. The laws are changing, are being updated. Courts are starting to make their first decisions in this space, so things will shift and change. But I think if you start with these principles of this positioning paper with the 4 ethical guidelines and the 7 key requirements, and you start building from that perspective that goes beyond what's in the law and goes into the space of what you want to see in the world, you should be on the safe side from a compliance perspective. Same thing happens as you keep growing the product. It's at continuously monitoring, so the monitoring doesn't stop. You have to continue monitoring what are you putting into the model, what are you taking out of the model. You have to keep having review meetings. You have to keep watching the feedback channels, keep talking to the legal team, also keep watching whether your desired societal impact is actually coming together. And this is your chance to refine, right? Like if you say, I wanted inclusivity, now I'm seeing I'm getting this and that, what needs to happen so the model can better cater to your intended purpose? And then at the very end of it, there never used to be as much of a need for this maybe, but there is a decision to be made what you're doing with this model, how it can still be accessed. Are you even keeping the data? Or are you deleting this data? Because the idea is, from the law's perspective, that you keep monitoring for as long as it's out there in the world to be used. So probably you would want to shut this down at some point. So if you think about this whole process of all the many ways in which ethics plays a role, or something like inclusivity can play a role in building an AI product, you see it has a ton of touch points and lots of people making decisions along the way. Hence, it's so important that the people who make these decisions, who might be your new designer, who might be the junior software developer in the team, who might be a product person in the next team over, have an easy time understanding how this thing should be behaving. And the easiest time for them to understand that you want inclusivity to play a key role in this is if it's clearly documented, clearly codified into the evals, clearly codified into your output review processes. It needs to be in all these places to make it easy for people to understand that you actually do care about these things. So with that, I want to just summarize a few concepts that I touched on, and then we'll get to questions. I think inclusivity gets created by you. When I asked you in the beginning, what kind of world do you want to live in? What do you care about? What do you want to see in the world? If you want inclusivity in AI products, it gets created by you as you're building them. That means codifying the values you care about. It means starting conversations about trustworthy and inclusive AI. It means making it easy for your team to follow ethical guidelines. That could be in the form of a code of ethics. It could be in the form of data sheets, of an AI and ethics canvas, of a model card, like all these ways in which it's easy for a team to understand what desired behavior is. And in the end, it's our intentions, our decisions, and actions that co-create the world we live in. So let's make it inclusive and trustworthy, please. I hope that in the female product lead community that has as a mission statement that we want to advance this, we care about this. And I hope that this gave you an idea or a starting point for how you might bake this into your product making process with your team. There's a blog post I wrote about this a while ago. Happy to share the link in follow up to this session today as well. And if you want to talk to me about this or get further materials or insights or links to things, then you can always message me, send me an email, find me on LinkedIn. I coach in this space. I teach workshops in this space. I speak about this at conferences. So if your company wants to hire me as a speaker on this, I'm happy to do it. And let's make it happen. Let's build inclusive AI and not the kind of unfair and biased products that we see in the world today. So I'll stop sharing my screen and we can jump into a conversation.
Thanks, Simonetta. That was great. I don't think that we have any questions yet. I don't know if people are just shy or everything was super clear and they have no opinion on the subject.
I mean, it's always easy to look at the presentation and kind of nod along and say, this makes sense, right? The difficult part is in actually making it happen.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, if people want to just type in the chat, if that's easier, I'm happy to read them out from the chat.
Where would I suggest to start? Honestly, I would start with conversation about what matters. Like my first few slides in this presentation today, right? I would start with sharing out what matters to me, right? I shared what matters to me is openness, beauty, inclusivity, these kind of things, and kind of engage in this conversation with the team and say, what matters to us here? And I mean, if you care about inclusivity being part of this, you get to put it in the room, right? Like you get to say, I care about equality. I care about inclusivity. I care about diversity. I care about all these things, right? It's all the things that maybe a year ago we kind of thought is like common sense, everyone just nodding along. It's under attack in the US right now, for sure. Also to some degree in Europe sometimes. But that's where I would start. I would start with these conversations.
I can ask a question on the. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Go
on. Hey everyone. I'm Marissa. I run an inclusion consultancy focused on inclusive innovation. So this is absolutely up my street in terms of the topic. I think the presentation was really spot on and really clear as well. I think we should catch up offline because there's loads we'd have to talk about, and we can add some of your content. We've got a playbook all about inclusive innovation, and we can add your content to it. There's not much in there on AI. So, well, there is some, but there's definitely room for more. And there's also a community of people talking about these kinds of topics. So, you know, I'm all for it. The question that I have is around roles. So I fully agree that, you know, you have to start by having conversations, but I think one of the challenges is that it's easy to start conversations when people feel accountable and they feel like that this is my job. So I'm interested in your experience of what are the job titles that you're seeing emerging, or what are the job titles that exist where people feel a sense of accountability for making for building inclusivity into their products and their AI models.
I would hope it is the product role in the team that wears this hat. I have actually heard Marty Kagan speak not about just the 4 risks to de-risk against, right? The value risk, the usability risk, the feasibility risk, and the viability risk. I also hear him speak about the ethical risk, right? So he has named this 5th risk, the ethics part, as part of what the product team is accountable for, right? He also often speaks about the trio then, so that it puts the product manager, the engineering lead, the design lead in the joint accountability on this topic, right? I agree with you also, if no one really wears the hat and really sees it as their job, that they should be championing this, there is a risk that no one does it. unfortunately, there is no consensus anywhere that says ethics is owned by the product manager in the team. I think it should be, though, because at the end of the day, you are responsible as a team, but also as a human for the things that you build, the impact you create, right? It's also why a lot of us like to be in this role to begin with, right? Because we get to shape something, we get to make something. And this is part of what you make. How you go about things is part of your value proposition. I also think the product manager owns the viability piece. And if you break down viability a little bit more, right, it is about both the business success of the of whatever business model you create with your product, whether it's an AI product or not, right? It's also the compliance piece, right? And compliance has very close touch points with ethics. So I really feel like it should be on the job description of the product person. I also know in many places it's not. My take on this is ultimately it's a team sport. That's why I said start a conversation about it. The spark of who starts this conversation could come from anybody. It could be somebody in the support team. It could be somebody in the legal team. It could be a client. It could be you in product, right? It will move and actually have impact and actually get considered if the whole team somehow aligns around it, right? If you have the whole team committed to this notion that inclusivity should be happening, right? Because you spoke about it, you agree with it, you codified it, you make decisions according to this principle, then it starts coming to life, right? So somebody has to wear this hat to fill this with life, fill it with energy. And I would hope that a lot of product people or people who care about the topic of inclusivity in this context will jointly wear this hat. And I agree with you, that's not how many people see it, right? And I think it's up to us also to kind of push for this and take a stand and say, I see it this way, right? If I were to build an AI product, this is what I would do. This is how I would go about it. And I think at least in Europe, the legal landscape can be our ally in pushing for it. It shouldn't be my only motivation of why I push for it, right? That, oh, maybe there's a compliance risk. Oh, maybe there's a fine. Therefore, I should be acting fair. It's like, I hope that you would approach it from the angle of like, this, it's actually more joyful. It's actually more fair. It's actually more like a world I want to live in. This is a space where I feel like I can belong. And you want to create this, and that's your motivation for pushing for it. But like, however you balance this, like, I feel it comes back down to being a product responsibility that's oftentimes not very clearly spelled out.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with everything you're saying. I think there will always be multiple drivers. I don't think it's a case of we need to push for it always to be compliance or always to be society. But I do think there's something we can collectively do, which is to, in the same way that, you know, when I was first a product manager many moons ago, no one knew what product management was, and the field of product management evolved. I do think there's something around helping the field of product to realize that actually this is a fundamental part of product. And I wonder whether there's some collective thinking that could be done to try and support product managers to help to give them the ammunition to within their organization say, actually, no, this is part of product. It's not negotiable. It is just,
So Gabi Bogrem is another product coach who I have heard speak about this quite candidly. She actually expanded on this Marty Kagan thing and very clearly put ethics as the fifth pillar there. And I think like all of us can pick this up and start speaking about it this way and always just mention ethics as part of it, right? Because if that becomes normal, if more people start thinking and speaking about it this way, this is how we can all jointly push an idea into the field.
Exactly. I fully agree. Yeah, happy to pick up offline if anyone here wants to kind of explore that further. I think it's really important, and if we can kind of gather, if there are others out there who are, and I know there's some work in the US where there's a group that's looking at product equity as a kind of concept and trying to put some framing around what that looks like. But I think it needs more voices and to be more standardized, so that more people can go, oh yeah, of course, this is just how it's just part of the role.
Right. And I think it starts with spaces like this, right? Where we have this conversation and people say, oh yeah, maybe I could do this too, right? I have permission to add ethics to the stack.
Yeah, don't wait for permission, I guess is the message. It's something everyone can act on.
Any other thoughts or reactions? Maybe contrarian views, they're welcome too.
I actually had a thought when you were sharing the slides about AI generated images, and how it kind of portrays the kind of white man sitting around the table. I had actually seen that there was a bit of like a TikTok trend asking Chat GPT to create an image of how it sees you as a person throughout, like using your conversation as like a basis for that. And I thought, oh, that's quite interesting. I'm actually going to do it. And after waiting ages, obviously, for the picture to generate, it kind of made me a white male hipster, skateboarder kind of vibe, in late 20s, early 30s. And then I asked it to ask, like, why is it kind of painted me in that picture? And it was kind of along the lines of the work that I do and the kind of support that I ask for. Kind of thought I was in a professional setting in the workplace, and just assumed my gender because I never said whether I was a woman or a male, so it just went for male. And kind of made me a hipster because I was really casual in our communications. I just thought it was really funny, a funny bit to try and see what it comes up with. But yeah.
Yeah, I can try to share another illustration that I'm using in a different kind of training context that I think builds on what you just said. Let's see if this pulls up. This is like from a different training, and forget that the headline's in German, but basically the prompt was make a picture of employees in a company, and it brought this up, right? And you might say, oh, here's some Asian faces. There's some diversity ethnically, but they're all young. All the women have open long hair. They're all slim. They're all in an office context. Nowhere in this prompt did it say it should be in an office context. And the next iteration is like, show me employees in a German company, and you see this, right? Obviously, somewhere in the source data, there's like lots of pictures of Germans that are in some factory setting and somehow stern looking, and it's kind of like a representation of the bias of what's in the source data in combination with what whoever tagged this data thought German people look like, right? And then make an image of diverse employees in a German company, and it flips back to now fairly diverse, but all in an office setting, all still very young, all wealthy. So obviously not a fair representation of how diversity might look like, right? And so if you don't get very specific in your prompt and what you want to say, it's going to always spit out an average of whatever was in the training data. And however it was codified, right? Like however the source data was tagged. So I find this very telling as an illustration because it shows you how much power there is in making the source data fair, in making the model ways and the evals and everything fair, and in how you control for the outputs if you want something like inclusivity or diversity actually represented in the output data. There is no way around like playing with whatever model you build, right? And actually checking for whether or not it delivers the thing that you want to say. So yeah,
it's quite scary. And I think it, like in this day and age as well, like the problems that we're seeing like in the world, and with children growing up with this technology as well, it can be really easy to kind of give them thoughts that they maybe wouldn't have from home, from the family, from school. It's that kind of separate, well, it made the picture for me, so it must be true. Like the one of the kind of older people in a factory that's crazy. But yeah, I think it's, for me, the big thing is, and why I'm quite interested in the ethics, is around kind of younger people using it, like children, basically, and to make sure it's still like the best safe environment that it can be.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think we're all kind of like in this experiment together right now. Like the unchecked by default, what comes out of a box from AI tools right now is as biased as society, right? So it's not by default pushing for more fairness, by default pushing for more equality, by default pushing for more inclusiveness, unless we change the way these systems work.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like what we're up against. From my perspective, right, there's always this debate in Europe on like, is it a good thing that there's so much regulation? I'm grateful there is a starting point of regulation that you can at least have a debate around, and it has basic guardrails in place that has like some key ethical concepts at heart that I can agree with, right? How we fill this with life is up to all of us, right? But that is the kind of world I want to live in. So I'm grateful that the EU is taking a stand, however watered down it might look, right? But it's a starting point. It is a helper in having these conversations in companies on why this is important, why it matters, and if the vehicle to deliver the message is the threat of a fine, so be it.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely, super important. But yeah, I think the session today has definitely given us some food for thought, and some practical things we can do to kind of push for more fairness, more inclusivity in AI products. So thank you, Simonetta, for running the session today. Before everyone drops off, I just wanted to really quickly put up our impact question at the end. This is really important for us to capture, as we are a CIC here in the UK. So understanding our impacts to our community is really important. So if you have a couple of seconds, please just let us know how the session was for you, what you're taking away from the session. We'd really appreciate that. But yeah, other than that, hope to see you again at a future event. You can find us on Luma. We've got a website, femaleproductlead.com, where you can find out everything about what we do, how to join if you're not a member yet, and links to our events as well. So yeah, hope everyone had a good session today and learned something. I certainly have. And yeah, again, thank you, Simonetta, for taking us through this content today. Really important and really relevant in today's day and age, for sure.
Well, you're very welcome. And as I said, like this is not a complete or perfect throw at it, right? So if you have ideas of how to make this better, if you want to collaborate around this, I'm always game. I do care about this stuff.
I've also linked to your blog, Simonetta, in the chat, so people can find you on there. And of course, if you want to find Simonetta on LinkedIn, that's also a good place to connect.
Yep.
But yeah, I will stop recording now. Thanks everyone for attending, and hope to see you again soon.
Thank you so much. That was great. Love to follow up afterwards.